Well, there's been no shortage of critics questioning the timing and focus of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. And here to respond to some of those criticisms is Israel's Consul General to Toronto and Western Canada, DJ Schneeweiss. Consul General, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to begin with Mr. Netanyahu's decision to even address this joint session of the U.S. Congress. He was invited not by the U.S. president, but invited by the Republican Party. Why make a speech if he might offend the American administration?
It's true that there is a risk of that, but the Prime Minister tried and has spent a lot of time while he's in Washington this week to reassure the administration that that was not the intent at all. The truth is the depth of concern in Israel, across the board in Israel, not just the Prime Minister's concern, but the security establishment and the entire political spectrum regarding the threat that Iran poses not only to Israel but to the world at large. The depth of that concern is so deep that the Prime Minister felt it was important enough to go, even though there may be those that felt that it was damaging or somehow inappropriate.
Well, there is still time after the general election in Israel, which is going to be on March 17th. There is still time, a short amount of time, in which he could make those same points after a general election in Israel. Why make it ahead of the election if it's not about domestic politics at home?
Well, there is still time, but there's a lot less time. He could have gone 2 weeks earlier, but it didn't suit the Republicans and Democrats in the Congress. One can focus on the timing of it, but to be honest, to the average Israeli, what the Prime Minister said this evening is not new. We live and breathe the threat that Iran poses every day. The compelling need was, or the compelling sense was that there was a need to convey those truths to the broader audience. And this platform was, of course, an immense one. It's been broadcast around the world. And I think if we get away from the distraction of the Israeli elections, which are the smaller issue here, the bigger issue is that it's Prime Minister Netanyahu who's been the only person who's been able to get the Iranian challenge, the threat posed by Iran, onto the headlines, onto the television, into people's minds. And there is a crucial fork in the road ahead of us. Will there be a bad deal signed which will, as the Prime Minister said this morning, pave the way to Iran getting the bomb? Or will there be a better deal signed which will prevent that? That's the crucial issue here.
Well, and not to speak for the U.S. administration, but there seems to be an intonation from the Obama administration that to speak to Iran and to negotiate a deal on nuclear power, nuclear arms, is better than not to speak to Iran. What do you make of that argument?
We support it. We definitely believe in the negotiating process. The deal here, or the question here, is not between, if you like, a negotiated deal and a military option. That's not the alternative. The alternative is between a bad deal and a much better one. And we fully support the negotiating process. We fully support the United States and the other world powers in that effort. But that effort has to be one which takes away from Iran the capacity to break out and acquire nuclear weapons at their own decision. It requires a need to roll back their capacity to do that. And it certainly requires that at the end of whatever deal is signed, that they then don't have the legitimacy of going forward and building a weapon without any kind of international restriction. 10 years, which is the current sort of timetable that is being bandied about, at least publicly, that is a blink of an eye. God save us all if Iran in 10 years' time has the international blessing to develop its own nuclear weapons.
Now, in that speech to the joint session of Congress, which just happened in the last hour, many people were applauding the Israeli Prime Minister. Many people stood to their feet. Obviously, there are a number of people in the U.S. Congress who support what he had to say. That said, the U.S. Vice President was out of the country, not present during this joint session. President Obama has refused to meet Netanyahu while he's been in D.C. What type of influence will this speech actually have?
Well, there's been a political dimension to this, and some of that is unfortunate, some of that was unnecessary. But in any political body, whether it's in the United States, in Israel, here in Canada, politics has its role to play. But I would suggest that as we look at it, we distinguish between the politics and the substance. There is politics, and we can spend all day talking about it. But the substance is one where there is broad agreement across the Congress, both sides of the aisle in Washington, that any deal with Iran has to be a strong one and has to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear weapons. That's what we're striving to achieve. That's what we want to work with the United States to achieve, and that's what we hope that President Obama and his negotiators will strive to achieve.
Consul General, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that was DJ Schneeweiss, the Consul General of Israel, to Toronto and Western Canada.